Taiwan recently announced that a researcher working in one of their labs had been infected with COVID after being bitten by lab mice on 2 separate occasions. The incident, which took place in a lab with significantly more stringent safety controls than the Wuhan lab, has renewed the debate over origins of the COVID pandemic. If a worker can get infected at a Biosafety Level 3 lab in Taiwan, they can certainly become infected at a Biosafety Level 2 lab in China. Contrary to the impression created by the corporate media's reporting, laboratory accidents are surprisingly and disturbingly common. The immediacy of Taiwan's transparency contrasts sharply with China's ongoing efforts to impede any investigation into the origins of the pandemic, which raises another question altogether. Why were we funding gain-of-function research in a communist country famous for its lack of transparency? Hi everyone, and welcome to Truth Over News with Jeff Carlson and Hans Manka.
That's right. These kinds of lab leaks happen all the time, actually. Even here in the United States, we've had mishaps. And in China, the last 6 known outbreaks of SARS-1 have been out of labs, including the last known outbreak, which was a pretty extensive outbreak that China initially wouldn't disclose that it came out of a lab. It was only disclosed finally by some journalists that were able to trace that outbreak back to a laboratory.
Taiwan's COVID lab leak took place at a Biosafety Level 3 lab. Biosafety Level 3 requires the use of personal protective equipment, biosafety cabinets, sustained directional airflow, no air recirculation, as well as self-closing and interlocked doors. By contrast, as Shi Zhengli, the director of the Wuhan Institute of Virology, admitted 7 months into the pandemic, the gain-of-function experiments being conducted on coronaviruses at her lab were done in much less secure Biosafety Level 2 labs. As explained by Rutgers University biologist Richard Ebright, Biosafety Level 2 is the biosafety level of a U.S. dentist's office with only minimal precautions being taken. The use of Biosafety Level 2 labs for gain-of-function experiments by the Wuhan Institute of Virology has been heavily criticized by many scientists. Michael Lin, a bioengineer at Stanford University, said that allowing work on potentially dangerous bat viruses at Biosafety Level 2 is an actual scandal. And a prominent and early supporter of the natural origins narrative, Columbia University virologist Ian Lipkin, changed his mind about the virus's origins after the Wuhan Institute of Virology admitted it had conducted its coronavirus experiments at a Biosafety Level 2 lab. Lipkin stated that it shouldn't have happened. People should not be looking at bat viruses in Biosafety Level 2 labs.
The open and immediate manner in which the Taiwanese government handled their lab leak incident contrasts sharply with China's handling of the COVID pandemic. Chinese Communist Party officials refused to acknowledge the COVID outbreak until Taiwan notified international authorities on December 31, 2019. But despite China's refusal to acknowledge an outbreak, there were earlier warnings from those stationed in Wuhan. According to the U.S. Consul General in Wuhan, the city was hit by an unusually vicious flu-like outbreak in October 2019. And a November 2019 intelligence report by the U.S. military's National Center for Medical Intelligence reportedly warned of a contagion and stated that it could be a cataclysmic event. The genomic sequence of COVID-19 was discovered no later than December 27, 2019. Both Chinese and Western scientists obtained copies at that time. But under pressure from the Chinese Communist Party, neither Chinese nor Western scientists shared the information publicly. When a Chinese scientist from Shanghai finally released the sequence on January 11, 2020, the CCP shut down his lab. The CCP's cover-up and the capitulation by scientists allowed the virus to continue its spread at a critical time. It also gave the CCP additional time to obfuscate the virus's origins and create a natural origin narrative centered around the Hunan seafood market. China's censorship has taken many forms. Recently, Peter Daszak, the president of EcoHealth, and the body through which Dr. Anthony Fauci funded the Wuhan Institute of Virology, told the National Institutes of Health that he was unable to hand over requested genetic sequence data from his gain-of-function experiments to the NIH because the data was going through an approval process by the Chinese Communist Party authorities. This absurd arrangement with the CCP is also a breach of the terms and conditions of Daszak's NIH grant, which specifically required that all genetic sequence data be made publicly available. Chinese Communist Party oversight and control was not part of Daszak's agreement.
Although the Taiwan lab leak is raising fresh questions about the likelihood of a lab as the origin of the COVID pandemic, lab leaks are not as rare as the media would have the public believe. The 1918 Spanish flu pandemic marked the first appearance of the H1N1 virus. Although the initial outbreak was natural, the virus's sudden reappearance in the late 1970s was actually due to a lab leak of a stored strain of the H1N1 virus. We know this because the genetic sequence of the virus in the 1970s outbreak was nearly identical to the sequences of decades-old strains. Put another way, the virus was not evolving during this time. It was sitting in a lab. In 1979, spores of anthrax leaked from a lab in the Soviet Union, killing scores of people. At the time, Soviet authorities covered up the origins of the outbreak, claiming that it had come from contaminated meat. In a twist eerily reminiscent of the World Health Organization's COVID-19 origins investigation, a molecular biologist from Harvard University, Matthew Meselson, was allowed to travel to the Soviet Union to investigate the outbreak. Upon his return, Meselson issued a report that backed the Soviet version of events, claiming that the outbreak started at a contaminated meat processing plant. Meselson stated that that explanation was plausible and consistent with what is known from medical literature and recorded human experiences with anthrax. In another parallel to the natural origins narrative for COVID-19, where illegal wildlife markets were initially blamed for the pandemic, Meselson claimed that the outbreak was caused by the illegal sale of meat. After the fall of the Soviet Union, it was finally revealed in 1992 that the outbreak had in fact originated at a military research facility. The original SARS outbreak in 2003 made headlines across the world. However, a less known fact is that the SARS virus has subsequently leaked out of various labs at least 6 times. The first incident occurred in Singapore, a country known for its meticulousness and attention to detail.